All right, everyone, we're going to get started here. If you want to come grab a seat, make yourself comfortable. There's plenty of space. I'll introduce myself while everyone's getting seated. My name is Wendy Novak, and I am with a company called Placeworks. Welcome to the General Plan, first community workshop for the General Plan update. The city has retained Placeworks to help update the general plan, put together some of the community outreach, update the elements. A little history about me. In 2007, I worked with another colleague here at the city, Ken Lyon, to update the general plan. So this isn't my first rodeo here, and I'm glad to be back working with all of you to see what's worked and what hasn't. So tonight, I would like to introduce to you, this is Flynn Fagg. He's the director, what's your official, director of planning services? Planning director. There's so many different ways to say it. And he's going to introduce you to the process, and then I will take it back over and talk a little bit about what the general plan does and where we're headed.
Wendy, thank you very much. I'd like to say thank you to all of you for coming out this evening. We really appreciate your attendance here at our first community workshop for the general plan update. As part of this workshop, I'd like to introduce some of our General Plan Steering Committee members. If I could have the General Plan Steering Committee members stand up and just say hi. So this is an important group of people who are assisting us with the General Plan update. They'll be reviewing our goals and our policies and objectives. They're assisting us with outreach to neighborhoods and community groups, and they'll be doing a lot of work on behalf of the city in terms of updating the general plan. So I just wanted to introduce them and say thanks for all of the service that they're going to give us over the next 8 to 10 months or so. Also, I'd like to welcome members of our Planning Commission. If I could have our Planning Commissioners just say hi. We've got a few of them here in the audience. We also have representatives from our Architectural Advisory Committee, a lone representative. And then also, we've got a member of our Historic Site Preservation Board here. Catherine, hi. So we're glad to have representatives from our city boards and commissions, as well as representatives from our neighborhood groups and members of our community. Again, thank you for being here this evening. Wendy is going to go ahead and talk about our general plan update process. Before we do that, I was just given news that as part of Black History Month, we're sad to announce the passing of Katherine Johnson. I don't know if all of you saw the movie Hidden Figures. She was the mathematician at NASA. She just passed away today at the age of 101. So we celebrate her. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Wendy, and she'll tell us about the update process, what we're doing here this evening. And with that, Wendy, I give it back to you.
Great. Well, as Flynn said, well, you know what? I actually have a mic. I'm so used to gravitating toward that podium. Tonight is the kickoff of the general plan update, and we are grateful that you are out because this plan is the community's plan, and our job is to listen and to hear what you have to say. So tonight, what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about a refresher on what a general plan is, what it does, some of the things that have changed or stayed the same since the last update, what we know about the community and why it matters about how we plan for the future, and then to talk a little bit about opportunities that all of you have to help weigh in and influence the process. Tonight's presentation is an open house style, so you can come and go as you please. We'll be doing the presentation, and once the presentation is finished, then we will be back at the stations for you all to ask questions. I am very thankful that you all are here because your input, like I said, is what shapes this plan, and I'm already getting very enthusiastic people that are leaving me Post-its on the podium about things that they care about, and on the chairs. So know that all of your comments are going to be read and be integrated into the thought process and shared with the steering committee, planning commission, and council. So what is a general plan? What is this thing? As planners, we use it all the time, and it's something that's very familiar to us. But a general plan is a blueprint for how the city grows. It is that long-term vision. It usually looks out about 20 years. So the lifetime of this general plan will be to 2040. And it's a guiding document for what kind of decisions should be made about land use, circulation, open space, and several other elements that I'll get to in a moment. This is a document that cities are required to have by the state. Every city has one. It has maps and diagrams, which you've seen some of them in the back of the room. It requires goals, which are aspirational statements about what you want to achieve in the city. Policies, which start to drill down a little bit more in kind of the detail about how you achieve the goals. And then lastly, implementation actions. And that's like a specific build a park here, improve this intersection. It's the details, it's the how to get things done. The implementation actions also are usually assigned to, when we look at them, we look at which departments would be responsible for implementing them. And we also put a time frame on which they should be implemented. If it's short term, in the next 3 to 5 years, or if it's something that's a little bit more long term, it could be 10 to 15 years. It just depends on the funding and the phasing and the type of project. So when we talk about a general plan has elements. And what that translates to in planning terms is it's kind of the chapters, the required chapters that are in a general plan. So the state requires 7 elements. First is land use, then there's circulation, there's housing, and then there's conservation, noise, open space, and safety. At this time, the city is doing a focused general plan update. And so what that means is we're really looking at the details of 3 elements, which are land use, circulation, and housing. And I'll explain to you in a little bit some of the updates, so you'll see why there's going to be more detail in those elements than some of the others. When we're doing the limited update to the conservation, noise, and open space and safety elements, it means we'll be looking at them from an administrative point of view, if there's any cleanup from the last update, and if there's any legislative changes that would have prompted some updates to each of the elements. Let's see. So what a general plan is not. So one of the other tools that planners have is a zoning code, the document. So a general plan may outline where the commercial uses go, but that's commercial in a broad term, where we're looking at how a drive-through is permitted, or a new restaurant, or some specific use, or development standards such as building setbacks, building heights, parking requirements. Those are all in the zoning code. Those are not part of the general plan. The general plan looks at the overall land uses and how that map lays out, and the zoning code is the implementing tool for the general plan. A general plan is also not design guidelines. So you guys may be familiar with downtown has a series of guidelines, some very specific things related to design. That is a separate document and is more detailed than what we would normally put in a general plan. And then lastly, it's not a guarantee of a project approval. So if you see the land use plan and you see goals and policies and a project is meeting those, it still has to go through the proper review and vetting with the planning department or through a public hearing if it's required to do so. So just because it's consistent with the general plan does not mean that a project is automatically approved. So we talked a little bit about this being a focused general plan update, and so what does that mean? We're getting some recording feedback. So we are looking at some of the planning trends that we've seen since 2007. There's been a lot of legislative updates related to one of the, like an example is circulation. We're now looking at how you can plan not just for automobiles, which was primarily what circulation looked at in the past, or maybe bikes, but we look at pedestrians as well. It's called the Complete Streets approach. We want to confirm the vision and priorities. So over here at the Vision and Priorities Station, maybe some of you have had a chance to visit it or take an online survey. The community established a vision statement about what it wants to be 20 years from now. So we're taking a look at it again and saying, is that still appropriate? Is that still relevant? Is that what the community still wants to be? Or are there things that need to change? It's okay if the vision is exactly, it reads well and you think that's where we should go for the next 20 years. Then we'll focus on some of the goals and policies and implementation actions about how we can get you there and update those. We'll also confirm the goals and policies that support the vision and priorities. And then we will be looking at things like recently the Planned Development District was updated. And so there are references in the general plan that administratively need to be corrected and need to be made consistent with the update to that Planned Development District ordinance. And then lastly, we'll go through all of those implementation actions because in 10 years, I'm sure you've achieved some of the implementation actions that were set out. And so now we'll take a look at those, update them, and add new ones where they're relevant. So I talked a little bit also about legislative changes. So there have been many legislative changes that have happened definitely in the last 10 years. And some of these things you'll have heard about: environmental justice, greenhouse gas reduction, planning for climate change and adaptation, housing requirements, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes. And then I mentioned the complete streets as it relates to circulation. So what I wanted to do now is talk about the community profile. It's the part that I look at. It's like what we know about the community and why it matters, how that affects how we're looking at what kinds of things should change, what should stay the same, and maybe some new initiatives that you all take on. So I have some more detailed notes here. I need my cheat sheet. So what has changed since 2007? As far as growth goes, population-wise, you've moderately grown. It hasn't been a significant influx of new population to the community. So you're just keeping consistent, a moderate growth year after year. But as you could probably imagine, you have fewer younger and more older residents. And you're aging more quickly than other areas of the county. So for instance, the median age in Palm Springs is 54, and countywide it's 35. So what that means, like in the last 10 years, the median age has increased about 20% faster than the county. So we're looking at, it's not a surprise. It's not a surprise what the community is, correct? I mean, everybody has lived here. But one of the things and why it matters is that if we are looking at creating diversity or retaining diversity in age-wise in the city, what does that start to mean for housing or other uses as you move forward? So if we're losing the younger population, is it because of housing affordability? Is it because of the types of land uses that are available? And so if that's a desire in the vision to make sure to retain a balance of different ages of residents, then that's something that we will look at and develop strategies for. The city has been successful in providing jobs for its residents, but not housing for its workers, so it's the same thing. We've got a lot of people that work in the city, but don't necessarily live here. So it's trying to find ways, if that's the case, to minimize the number of trips that people are making to be able to live and work in the community. Also, right now, the jobs growth and retail sales indicate that the local economy is performing well. So most of your jobs are related to health, they're related to hospitality, and so that has been working out well for the city. So when we're looking at, sometimes in jurisdictions we need to attract certain businesses to help create a fiscal balance and fiscal sustainability for the community, but the mix of uses that you guys have and the jobs that you've brought in is helping to provide a healthy economy for the city so far. So you have a little bit lower household income than other places, but that's not surprising because of the large number of retirees that you have here. So if that balance started to shift and you had a younger population, then that income would likely change. Another thing to consider is that in the last several years, the housing that's been proposed or been built has been predominantly single family. So what that means, and I think it was, and Flynn, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was about 1,000 units, and of those 1,000 units, 100 of them are multifamily. So if we're looking at having diversity in the age and population, and we're looking at affordability for people to be able to live in Palm Springs, it's maybe looking at where the single family and the balance of the multifamily lies. I think that's it. Yeah, I think that it's in the last 10 years, the amount of single family in Palm Springs increased 87%. So it was a big jump as compared to your multifamily, which is much lower. So the way that Palm Springs currently houses its residents, you see, we talked about it, predominantly single family. You've got about 20,000 units, and then condominiums are next, with apartments following, and then a few mobile homes. And one of the things that we've been finding in Palm Springs is that a lot of the apartments over time get converted into condominiums. So when we're looking at that affordability or jobs or other things, one of the opportunities that the city has to maybe consider is looking at those, for rent opportunities or protecting those that are for rent now so they don't convert into for sale. So we talked a little bit about the Palm Springs vision and the vision station. And so I want to go over this vision statement and read it to you guys and just take it in and see if that still makes sense to you, if this is what you envision Palm Springs to be 20 years from now. And Palm Springs Vision 2007 said, "A world-renowned desert resort community where residents and visitors enjoy safe neighborhoods, an exciting social environment, and a relaxing leisure experience. We enhance our natural, cultural, and historical resources with sustainable economic growth and high style." That's so Palm Springs. I love that. "We provide responsive, friendly, and efficient public services within a government that fosters unity among all of our citizens." So that's the overarching vision. And so one of the things we're asking, is this still relevant? Is there something that's missing from this vision? So think about that. Come put either a Post-it on the station or provide some input on the survey either here or online. But that's one of the things that we're asking you and the rest of the community to look at. Because the vision, and I'll get to the priorities in a minute, but the vision is what we will always go back to when we're looking at updating those goals or the implementation actions or any of it. Is everything that we're doing working toward achieving this vision? So second are the priorities. And this is the cheat sheet of the priorities, because we could be here all night and I'm sure you don't want me to read them all to you. So I'll give you the highlights, but we also have a handout and we also have details online, which has a couple sentences to explain each one of the priorities in a little bit more detail if you want to really understand what we're getting at in these. But in 2007, the priorities looked at things like making the city a premier desert resort, a leader in the use of resources of land, water, and energy, which I think you guys have been working on your sustainability plan and a bunch of other things, so we've been moving toward that. Diversifying the city's economic foundations and being that choice where people want to go to establish a business. Having diversity of retail opportunities, hospitality, and tourist opportunities. And then there's a few more here where we're talking about community identity. Palm Springs, everybody knows what Palm Springs is. People say they're going to Palm Springs, but they're really going somewhere else, nearby, and because it's such a, identifiable space. Mixing of uses so that people can get around and try to minimize the amount of time that they're in a car. That's the whole point, is to get people out and walking or biking. And then the development that really enhances the views and all of those natural resources that you have with your mountains and your washes and those things that make Palm Springs so remarkable from a natural perspective. So the survey is over there. We'll have that open until March 6th online. So if you also have friends and family that would like to take it, please take those little business cards and give them the website, put it on your Facebook, let them know, because we want input to see if we're headed in the right direction or if there are some things that need revising. That information will be shared with the steering committee, and their job is to help us translate all of that. Here's what we heard from the different districts, because they represent different districts and they represent different agencies, and to translate that into what those edits are for the general plan. We have other stations tonight that we are here to answer questions about, or that we would like you to help us get some feedback, initial feedback from you. One is a land use station. And we don't anticipate that there will be wholesale land use changes through this general plan update. A lot of the uses are working well, and we think that there's some administrative updates that are going on. So we want to really hear from you. Are there areas that we're not thinking about? Are we still on the right track? The use is appropriate? Are there areas that you really enjoy and need to be enhanced or celebrated a little bit more? Are there areas that aren't getting the attention they need, or maybe there's opportunities to do something special that just we haven't been able to take a close enough look at yet? Let us know. And I already see there's Post-its and notes over there at that table. So that would help, as we can share that with the steering committee as well. One of the things that we need to look at, and is another station, is housing. And when we talk about housing for the future, this slide gets into the planning mumbo jumbo that we don't expect you guys to all translate. But what it means is there is a regional housing needs allocation, which from planning is called RHNA. That's how, if you hear the word RHNA. And what that is the state looks at housing, and regionally, there is an allocation of number of units that jurisdictions need to be able to show that they can accommodate in their city. So everybody has to provide a certain amount of housing, and it has to be in a certain amount of affordability ranges. And this is over an 8-year period. It's for the period of the housing element. So that's one of the elements that's being updated. For Palm Springs, it depends on a lot of different factors. But for Palm Springs, the number of units that the city needs to show that they can plan for, that can be constructed, it doesn't mean the units have to be built, but it shows that you have that ability to construct them, is 2,627 units. So we'll be looking at all of your existing land uses in the general plan, seeing where we can accommodate all of those units on the uses that you have, but then maybe need to make refinements to some approaches or some areas to make sure that we can address that requirement. I mentioned 30% of the units need to be lower income categories. So that's when I started talking about apartments and other things. That's how we can start to address those requirements to help get them affordable. And I mentioned earlier that the apartments have historically turned into condominiums, which tend to make them less affordable. So I didn't talk about the housing station. So one of the things we have is photos of the different housing types that you guys have in the city. And then we also have some questions about what you may be concerned with in relation to housing. There's a lot of different categories, and that will help us to write the housing element. The last station is circulation. And what we want to know, this is big picture, how do you get around the city? Where do you travel to and from? Are there gaps in the way that you get there that prevent you from getting to where you want to go without using a car? So we're looking at, are there trails that you would like to walk on, bike on, that don't connect or don't go anywhere? Are there places that if you have your house and you're trying to get to the grocery store that's 2 blocks away, is there a convenient way to do that without getting in your car? We're looking at those types of connections, and we're also looking at things like the neighborhood electric vehicles. We're looking at transit, and we're looking at just how your roadways work. So if there are areas that are kind of challenged and need improving, we want to hear about that. If there's an area that's working well and things that you like, we want to hear about that as well. So next steps, where do we go from here? This is the very first community workshop. This timeline is on the website and it's very detailed, but essentially in what we've been working on since the winter, we've had one steering committee meeting and we've been pulling together background information. So we've got to pull all the old documents from before, start doing traffic analysis, so traffic counts on the roadways, and this is our getting smart period. So we're also getting smart with the community and starting to get your feedback to help us shape how this update will go. The next steps will be coordinating with the steering committee, starting to identify opportunities to update each one of the elements, and they will walk through with them together different refinements and updates to the land use plan. There's an environmental review that goes with this whole process. So once we arrive at a land plan and updates to the elements, there will be environmental review so that if there's any potential impacts, that those can be addressed and mitigated. And then eventually there will be adoption by Planning Commission and Council. And so this is a couple-year-long process. We're looking at, well, it feels like a couple of years. By the time we go to spring 2021, time goes by. So it's something that you will be hearing from us periodically. There are a couple more opportunities for community workshops where we'll be touching back and reaching out to the community. Staff will be doing traveling road shows. So if you have a community group or an area that would like to have staff when we have some things to present, come to talk to you, be sure to let Flynn or David know, and we'll make sure we get you on the list for that as well. I think I just talked a little bit about future opportunities to engage. The steering committee meetings are also open to the public, so you're more than welcome to come to those. We have 7 more meetings to work through the elements and talk about different topics. We will be talking about the land use plan. We'll be reviewing all the goals and policies, the housing element and circulation. So the same topics we're having you guys help us with tonight are the same topics that the steering committee will be focusing on in a little bit more detail. And then reviewing the implementation strategies. We will let you know in advance, when the community workshops are and what the topics are. We appreciate your help when you first checked in to let us know how you heard about this, because we want to make sure we're talking to you in the way that is most convenient for you and easiest for you. So thank you for letting us know how you heard about this, because the more people that are involved, the better. That's a big goal of the city, is to have as many people involved as possible. And so the city has also set up a website. It's psgeneralplan.com. And if I mentioned, there's the business card, so if you don't want to have to write it down or remember it, just grab the business cards and the surveys and everything else that, as things come up, announcements, the steering committee agendas, all of that will be on the website and should be easily accessible to you. So with that, we wanted to thank you so much for coming. We're here to answer questions. We'll all be back at the stations. So come and go as you please. We'll be here until 7:30. And if you have any questions, just let us know. Thank you.